Hi, I'm Eugene. Today I'll tell you a story I heard from a friend. His name was Callum. Not a strong name. Not a name people feared. It was the kind of name that disappeared in a crowded room, soft and easy to forget. And for most of his life, Callum believed that was fine. He did not need people to fear him. He did not need people to admire him. He only wanted one thing: to be trusted. Trust was the only wealth he had ever owned. He came from a small apartment above a closed laundromat on the east side of the city. The pipes knocked at night. The heat failed every winter. His mother worked until her hands ached, and his father had vanished so early that Callum remembered him more as a shadow than a person. So Callum learned early not to ask for too much. He learned to be useful, quiet, careful, the kind of man people gave keys to because they knew he would never take what was not his. That was why his job at Veron House meant everything. Veron House was not just a company. It was a palace made of glass, money, and silence. The private investment firm sat on the top floors of a silver tower downtown, where the elevators smelled like leather and every receptionist smiled like she had signed a contract with perfection. The owner was Dorian Veron. He was 42, handsome in a cold way, with gray eyes that never looked surprised. People called him a genius. Magazines called him the gentleman of modern finance. Politicians smiled when he entered rooms. Charity boards begged for his name. Clients trusted him with fortunes. Employees feared disappointing him more than they feared being fired. Callum admired him. That was his first mistake. Dorian had hired Callum 3 years earlier as a junior financial assistant. The job was not glamorous. Callum checked reports, prepared folders, carried documents, updated client files, stayed late to fix numbers that senior analysts pretended not to notice. He was invisible, but he was useful, and Dorian noticed useful people. At least, Callum thought he did. Every Friday evening, when most of the office had emptied, Dorian would pass Callum's desk, pause, and place one hand on his shoulder. "You're loyal," he would say. "That is rare." Those words fed Callum for days, because loyalty was his language. He did not understand power. He did not understand games. He understood showing up. He understood doing the right thing when no one clapped for it. And then there was Alara, Dorian's younger sister. Alara did not belong to the same cold world as her brother. At least, that was what Callum believed. She was gentle, warm. She remembered the names of waiters. She laughed with her whole face. She once took off her expensive coat and gave it to an old woman outside a theater, then walked 3 blocks in the rain like it was nothing. Callum loved her before he admitted it. Alara loved him before he believed it. They met during a charity planning event at Veron House. Callum had been carrying boxes of printed donor cards when one box split open and scattered paper across the marble lobby. Everyone else stepped around him. Alara knelt and helped. "You look like a man trying not to panic," she said. "I'm failing quietly," Callum answered. She laughed. After that, she found excuses to speak with him. Coffee, questions, a misplaced schedule, a request for help with guest lists, then dinners, then long walks. Then one night under weak city lights, she looked at him and said, "You make me feel like I can breathe." Callum had never been anyone's heir before. He gave her everything. Not money. He had little. Not status. He had none. He gave her his faith, which is more dangerous, because money can be earned again. Faith leaves scars when it is stolen. When Callum proposed, he did it badly. No violin. No restaurant. No expensive view. Just a small ring he had saved 8 months to buy, held in shaking fingers outside the public library where they had once hidden from a storm. Alara cried. She said yes before he finished asking. For 6 months, Callum believed life had finally opened a door for him. He was wrong. It had opened a trap. The engagement party was held at the Meridian Club, a private members-only place where even the candles looked expensive. There were gold lights hanging from the ceiling, black marble floors, white flowers on every table, and champagne glasses lined up like little soldiers waiting for orders. Callum wore a navy suit Alara had chosen. It was the first suit he had owned that did not feel borrowed from a better man. "You look perfect," Alara whispered, fixing his collar. Callum smiled. "Do I look like I belong?" Alara touched his cheek. "You belong with me." He wanted to believe that. So he did. The ballroom was full of people with names Callum had only seen in business magazines. Investors, judges, donors, board members, a senator who kissed Alara's hand, a media executive who called Dorian the last honest man in finance. Callum heard that and almost laughed, not because he doubted it, because the phrase sounded too big for any human being. Dorian stood near the stage, smiling softly, accepting praise like a priest accepting confession. When he saw Callum, he raised a glass. "My future brother," he said. People turned. Callum felt heat rise in his face. Dorian came closer and embraced him in front of everyone. The room approved. For a brief moment, Callum felt lifted. Seen. Chosen. Then Dorian leaned near his ear and said, very quietly, "Come upstairs in 10 minutes. I need your help with something before the announcement." "What announcement?" Callum asked. Dorian smiled. "You'll like this one." Callum's chest filled with hope. For weeks, rumors had moved through the office. A new internal role. A promotion. A compliance coordinator position. Callum had worked hard enough to dream about it, but not confidently enough to expect it. Maybe tonight was the night. 10 minutes later, he excused himself from Alara. "Your brother needs me," he said. Alara's smile flickered. Only for a second. Callum noticed it, then dismissed it. That was the first warning he ignored. Dorian's private office was above the ballroom, behind a hallway where the carpet swallowed footsteps. The office had glass walls, dark shelves, and a desk so clean it looked unused. Dorian opened a drawer and removed a black envelope. Thick. Sealed. No label. "I need this placed in the secure cabinet in the records room," he said. Callum took it carefully. "What is it?" "Client material. Sensitive. I would do it myself, but I have to prepare downstairs." "Of course." Dorian studied him. "You understand discretion." Callum nodded. "Yes. That is why I trust you." There it was again, the word that always worked on him. Trust. Callum walked out with the envelope in his hand. The hallway camera saw him. The elevator camera saw him. The records room camera saw him. He opened the secure cabinet using the temporary code Dorian had given him and placed the envelope inside. He checked the lock twice. Then he returned downstairs. The whole trip took 6 minutes. 6 minutes to destroy 5 years of life. When Callum came back to the ballroom, the music was still playing, but something felt different. Dorian was no longer smiling. Alara stood near the stage with her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her eyes were red. Callum walked toward her. "What's wrong?" She looked at him, then looked away. Before he could ask again, the music stopped. Not faded. Stopped. The ballroom fell into a heavy silence. Dorian stepped onto the stage. He held the microphone with one hand and touched his chest with the other, like the pain was physical. "Friends," he said, "I am sorry to interrupt what should be a beautiful evening." A nervous laugh moved through the crowd and died quickly. Dorian lowered his head. "Something serious has happened tonight." Callum felt his stomach tighten. "Confidential documents connected to the Ormond Charity Fund have disappeared from my private office." Whispers broke out. Ormond was one of Veyron House's largest charity investment accounts. Everyone knew it. Everyone understood the size of the money without asking. Dorian continued. "The documents contained transfer approvals, donor records, and restricted financial instructions. If misused, the damage could be severe." Callum looked at Alara. Her face was wet with tears. "Alara," he whispered. She did not move. Dorian's voice became quieter, more wounded, more effective. "I did not want to believe what security showed me." The screen behind him turned on. Callum saw himself, walking into Dorian's office. The footage skipped. Now he was walking out, holding the black envelope. Another angle. Callum in the hallway. Another. Callum entering the records room. The video froze on his face. For 1 second, nobody spoke. Then the room turned toward him. Not slowly. All at once. Like a pack hearing blood hit the floor. Callum's mouth went dry. "No," he said. It came out too soft. Dorian looked at him from the stage. "Callum, you gave me that envelope." The room reacted. A few gasps. A few whispers. Dorian closed his eyes as if Callum had heard him. "Please don't." "No. You told me to put it in the cabinet." Dorian stepped down from the stage. His face carried perfect sadness. That was when Callum understood something terrible. Dorian was not reacting. He was performing. "Callum," Dorian said gently, "I know you've been under pressure." "What?" "I know money has been difficult." Callum stared at him. The statement was true. That made it worse. Dorian had selected a truth that could carry a lie. "You asked me last month about salary advancement," Dorian said. "I asked when the promotion decision would happen." Dorian looked at the crowd, then back at Callum. I wanted to help you. I really did. Callum turned to Alara. Tell them. You know I wouldn't do this. Alara covered her mouth. Her shoulders shook. Why? She whispered. The word hit him harder than a punch. Why would you say that? She stepped back. Dorian showed me the missing account notes. Your login accessed them. I didn't. Your code opened the cabinet. Because he gave it to me. Dorian's expression changed. Only slightly. A shadow behind the sadness. Security, he said. Two men moved toward Callum. He backed away. Wait. Check the cabinet. The envelope is there. Dorian nodded to one of the guards. The guard spoke into his radio. Everyone waited. Callum could hear his own heartbeat. A minute later, the guard near the door looked up. His voice was flat. The cabinet is empty. Callum's breath left him. That was impossible. He had placed it there. He had locked it. He had checked twice. Unless someone had opened it after him. Unless the code was not temporary. Unless the whole thing had never been about the envelope. The room began to decide. He saw it happen in their eyes. The poor fiancé. The junior assistant. The man who wanted a better life. The man close enough to the family to steal. It made sense to them because they needed it to make sense. Rich people loved charity, but they trusted poverty only when it stayed grateful. Callum tried to speak, but the security guards grabbed his arms. Don't touch me, he said. It sounded desperate. Desperate sounded guilty. Dorian moved close. So close only Callum could hear him. I gave you a chance to belong, Dorian whispered. Then louder for the room. I won't press charges tonight. Out of respect for my sister. It was brilliant. Cruel. Merciful in public. Murderous in effect. No police meant no investigation. No investigation meant no discovery. No discovery meant the story would be whatever Dorian said it was. Callum looked at Alara one last time. If you ever loved me, he said, tell the truth. Alara cried harder. But she stayed silent. And silence became the knife. They walked him out through the ballroom. Not the back door. Through the center. Past every table. Past every camera phone. Past every face. Someone whispered, disgusting. Someone else said, Dorian should have known better. Another voice, older and cold, said, people like that always reach above their station. Callum did not fight. Fighting would make him look violent. He did not beg. Begging would make him look guilty. He walked out with his head up. But inside, something was collapsing floor by floor. Outside, the night air was cold. The guards released him near the curb. One of them would not meet his eyes. That somehow hurt more. Callum stood alone while music slowly started again inside the building. That was the sound he remembered for years. Not Alara crying. Not Dorian lying. The music returning. As if his life had been only a small interruption in a beautiful evening. By morning, the video was online. Someone had posted it with the caption, Gold Digger Fiancé Caught Stealing from Charity Fund. By noon, his company email was disabled. By 3, HR sent a letter. Termination for breach of trust. By evening, Alara returned the ring through a courier. No note. Just the ring in a small gray box. Callum sat on the edge of his bed and stared at it for an hour. Then his landlord knocked. Rent was late. Of course it was. The world does not pause its bills for humiliation. The next weeks became a slow public drowning. Callum applied for jobs. No answer. He called former co-workers. No one picked up. He emailed Dorian, demanding the full security footage. No response. He called Alara from another number. She answered once. For 3 seconds, neither of them spoke. Then she said, please don't contact me again. Alara, I loved you. I know, she said, and hung up. That was worse than hate. Hate would have meant he still mattered. Callum tried lawyers. One asked for a retainer he could not imagine paying. One listened for 10 minutes and said, without charges, there's no case to defend. And defamation against a man like Dorian? You'll need money, proof, and stamina. I have the truth, Callum said. The lawyer sighed. Truth is not a strategy. That sentence stayed with him. Truth is not a strategy. For a while, Callum hated it. Later, it saved him. 3 months after the party, he lost the apartment. The official reason was unpaid rent. The real reason was that his life no longer had a place to stand. He slept first on a friend's couch. Then the friend became distant. Then the friend's girlfriend started leaving apartment listings open on the kitchen table. Callum understood. He left before they had to ask. For 2 weeks, he slept in his car. Then the car was repossessed at 4:12 a.m. while he was inside it. He woke to metal chains and flashing lights. The tow driver looked embarrassed. "Man, you gotta get out." Callum stepped onto the sidewalk with a backpack and one coat. Snow was falling lightly. He almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so complete. By winter, Callum washed dishes behind a restaurant where Dorian sometimes hosted private dinners. He never saw him. Only the evidence of him. A reserved table. A bottle of wine worth more than Callum made in 2 weeks. Men in coats laughing near black cars. At night, Callum carried trash into the alley and stared up at the silver buildings downtown. Somewhere above those lights, Dorian was still respected. Alara was still protected. The lie was still alive. And Callum was becoming a ghost. The first time Miriam saw him, he was bleeding from the hand. A glass had shattered in the sink, slicing across his palm. He wrapped it in a towel and kept working. Miriam watched from the corner table. She was old, small, and severe, with silver hair tied tightly behind her head. She came every Thursday, always alone, always ordered tea, never dessert. The servers ignored her because she tipped in exact amounts and never smiled. But that night, she approached the kitchen door. "You should clean that properly," she said. Callum looked at his hand. "It's fine." "No, it is untreated damage pretending to be strength." He almost smiled. "That sounds personal." "It is." She handed him a card. No company name. Only an address and a time. "Tomorrow, 7 p.m. "What is this?" Callum asked. "A choice." "I don't need charity." "I don't offer charity," Miriam said. "Charity is what powerful people use to wash blood off their hands." Callum froze. Miriam looked straight at him. "I know what Dorian did." The kitchen noise seemed to disappear. Callum stepped closer. "What did you say?" "I said I know what Dorian did. And if you are done surviving badly, come tomorrow." Then she left. Callum did not sleep that night. He stared at the card until sunrise. Part of him thought it was another trap. Another humiliation. Another person wanting to study the ruined man. But another part of him, the part that refused to die even after everything, folded the card into his wallet. The next evening, he went. The address led to an old building between a closed bookstore and a tailor shop. The stairs creaked. The lights buzzed. On the 3rd floor, Miriam opened the door before he knocked. Inside was not an office. It was a war room. Filing cabinets lined the walls. Newspaper clippings covered corkboards. Photos, names, dates, company structures, charity registrations, bankruptcy notices, obituaries. At the center stood one wooden table covered with folders. Miriam poured coffee into a cracked mug. "Sit." Callum sat. She placed a newspaper clipping before him. Dorian, 10 years younger, smiling beside a man Callum did not recognize. "My son," Miriam said. Callum looked up. He worked for Dorian before Veron House became untouchable. He found irregular transfers moving through a children's medical charity. He reported them internally. Callum already knew the next part. He was accused of selling donor data. No charges. No trial. Just reputation murder. Callum swallowed. What happened to him? Miriam's face did not change, but the room became colder. He lived for 3 more years. Technically. Callum looked away. "I'm sorry. Do not spend sorrow like currency," Miriam said. "It buys nothing." She opened another folder. Inside were documents. Names of charities. Vendor payments. Consulting fees. Shell companies. Patterns. So many patterns. "Dorian does not steal like a street criminal," Miriam said. "He relocates money through respectability. He builds a beautiful hallway between good intentions and private accounts." Callum read the pages slowly. At first, he understood little. Then pieces began connecting. A charity fund pays a consulting company. The consulting company pays a vendor. The vendor is connected to another company. That company has no employees. Then money disappears into silence. "Why haven't you gone to the police?" he asked. Miriam's eyes hardened. With what? Suspicion? Patterns? Grief? Men like Dorian do not leave fingerprints. They leave paperwork that looks boring enough to survive. Callum sat back. "Then what do you want from me?" Miriam leaned forward. "I want you to become the kind of man who can read the boring parts." That was the beginning. Not of revenge. Not yet. Of education. For the next year, Callum lived 2 lives. By day, he washed dishes, carried boxes, cleaned floors, and counted tips. By night, he He sat in Miriam's war room and learned how power hides. She taught him corporate filings, audit trails, compliance rules, public databases, vendor records, charity reports, tax disclosures, metadata, procurement patterns. She taught him that fraud rarely screamed. It repeated, same vendor, same timing, same percentage, same signatures, same missing explanations. Do not chase drama, Miriam told him. Chase repetition. Callum changed slowly. His anger did not disappear. It became organized. He stopped imagining Dorian apologizing. He stopped imagining Alara running back. He stopped replaying the ballroom every night. Not because it hurt less, because Miriam gave him something heavier to carry. Purpose. One night, after 6 hours of reviewing charity statements, Callum slammed a folder shut. This is impossible. He covered everything. Miriam did not look up. No, you are looking for one big door. Powerful criminals use many small windows. I'm tired. Good. How is that good? Tired men reveal whether they want justice or only comfort. Callum hated her that night. Then he came back the next evening. And the next. And the next. 2 years passed. Callum Vale remained ruined. But Arlen Vale began to exist. Arlen was his middle name. Miriam suggested it after his 100th rejected job application. You cannot enter the city through the front gate, she said. Use the side road. It feels like hiding. It is hiding. Wolves hide too, before they hunt. Arlen Vale applied for remote bookkeeping contracts. Small companies. Messy accounts. Businesses too broke to care about prestige. He took every job. He fixed payroll errors. Found missing invoices. Cleaned tax records. Recovered stolen vendor payments. At first, no one cared. Then people started recommending him. Quietly. A clinic owner told a warehouse owner. A warehouse owner told a nonprofit director. The nonprofit director told a lawyer. Arlen became useful. Then trusted. That word again. But this time, Callum did not receive trust like a starving man receiving bread. He inspected it. Tested it. Earned it on paper. By the 4th year, he had an apartment again. Small. Clean. His own. He owned 2 suits. Both dark. Both paid for in full. He had a professional license in compliance review. He had clients who respected his work. He had a name that opened doors Callum Vale could not approach. But he still kept the gray ring box in a drawer. Not because he loved Alara. Because he needed to remember the cost of blindness. Then one rainy evening, Miriam called him to the war room. She was thinner now. Older in a way that seemed to have happened suddenly. On the table lay a folder marked North Star. Callum removed his coat. What is it? Miriam pushed the folder toward him. Dorian is expanding. Callum opened it. Veyron House was preparing a merger with North Star Capital, a massive private equity group with international reach. If the merger succeeded, Dorian would become nearly untouchable. More money, more influence, more distance between him and consequences. Callum read silently. Then he stopped at one line. Independent pre-merger integrity review required. His pulse changed. Not faster. Lower. Deeper. Like a machine powering on. Miriam. Yes. Who is doing the review? She handed him the final page. There was the name. Arlen Vale. For a moment, Callum did not move. 5 years of hunger, shame, study, silence, discipline, and pain narrowed into one clean point. Dorian had once placed a false envelope in Callum's hand. Now Callum held the real folder. And this one could not be performed away. Miriam watched him carefully. This is not revenge, she said. Callum looked at her. No. No. Revenge is when you try to make your pain louder than the truth. This must be cleaner. He closed the folder. It will be. What do you want? Callum thought of the ballroom. The screen. The hands on his arms. Alara stepping back. Dorian whispering, I gave you a chance to belong. Then he thought of Miriam's son. Of every folder on her walls. Of every person turned into a warning because Dorian needed to stay golden. I want him in a room, Callum said, where his charm has nowhere to sit. Miriam smiled for the first time in years. It was not warm. It was sharp. Then prepare the room. 3 weeks later, Callum entered Veyron House for the first time since the night he was destroyed. The lobby had changed. New flowers. New security desk. New art on the walls. But the smell was the same. Leather. Glass cleaner. Money. The receptionist looked up. Good morning. Name? Callum paused. just long enough to feel the ghost of his old self standing beside him. Then he said calmly, "Arlenvale, North Star Compliance Review." The elevator doors opened, and Callum stepped inside, not as the man they had thrown out, as the man invited to inspect the foundation. Above him, on the top floor, Dorian was waiting to meet a stranger. He had no idea he was about to shake hands with the ruin he created. The elevator rose in silence. Callum watched the floor numbers change. 21, 22, 23. Each number felt like a year coming back. He remembered the last time he had been in this building. Not walking in, being dragged out. Back then, he had stared at the floor because he could not bear the faces. Now he looked straight ahead. The elevator doors opened. Veyron House looked almost the same. Glass walls, soft lights, quiet voices. People moving carefully, like fear had been polished into office culture. A young assistant approached him. "Mr. Vale?" "Yes. Mr. Veyron is ready for you." Callum followed her through the hallway. His reflection moved beside him in the glass. Older, sharper, calmer. The weak man from the engagement party was still there somewhere. But he was no longer driving. The assistant opened the conference room door. Dorian stood at the far end of the room. Gray suit, silver watch, perfect smile. He looked almost unchanged. That made Callum hate him more. Not loudly. Precisely. Dorian walked forward and extended his hand. "Arlenvale," he said warmly. "I've heard excellent things." Callum took his hand. The handshake lasted 2 seconds. Dorian did not recognize him. Not even a flicker. That hurt. Then it helped. Because Callum understood something important. Dorian had ruined so many lives that he no longer remembered all the faces. "Thank you," Callum said. "I prefer the work to speak first." Dorian smiled wider. "I like that." Of course he did. Predators always liked quiet prey. There were 5 people in the room. Dorian, his legal counsel, Celeste, 2 senior partners, and Alara. Callum saw her last. She sat near the window, tablet in hand, hair shorter now, face thinner, wedding ring absent. For 1 second, his lungs forgot their job. Alara looked at him politely. No recognition. Just another consultant. Just another man in a suit. Good, Callum thought. Let the truth arrive slowly. Dorian began the meeting. "This review is mostly procedural. North Star has strict policies, but we are an open book." Callum placed his folder on the table. "Open books are useful," he said, "especially when someone has removed pages." The room became slightly still. Dorian laughed softly. "I can see why they hired you." Callum did not laugh. He opened his laptop. "I'll need access to charity fund transfers, vendor payments, internal approvals, archive communications, and security logs connected to restricted document handling." Celeste frowned. "Security logs?" "Yes." "For a financial review?" "For an integrity review." Dorian raised one hand before Celeste could answer. "Give Mr. Vale what he needs." Callum looked at him. "Everything." Dorian held his gaze. "Everything relevant." There it was. The first small wall. Callum smiled politely. "I decide relevance." For the first time, something moved behind Dorian's eyes. Not fear. Annoyance. That was enough for day 1. The review began quietly. Callum did not attack. He did not accuse. He did not mention the past. He asked boring questions. He requested boring documents. He followed boring numbers. And like Miriam had taught him, he chased repetition. Same vendor. Same timing. Same percentage. Same missing explanation. Veyron House had handled 9 charity-linked funds in 12 years. 7 had unusual consulting fees. 5 used the same outside vendor. 3 showed late-night approval changes. 1 had no proper audit trail at all. The Ormond Charity Fund. Callum stared at that name for a long time. That was the fund from the engagement party. The fund he had been accused of trying to steal from. He opened the old records. Most files were clean. Too clean. Someone had removed the dirt and left polish marks. But clean files can still bleed. At 2:13 a.m. on the night of the party, someone had accessed the secure cabinet records. Not Callum. Not Dorian. An admin override. Alara's credentials. Callum leaned back. The room was empty except for the hum of the lights. He looked at the screen until the letters blurred. Alara. For 5 years, he had believed she stayed silent because she was weak. Now the question changed. Was she weak? Or involved? He copied the log. Saved it. Backed it up twice. Then he called Miriam. She answered on the second ring. "You found something." Alara's credentials opened the cabinet after I left. Silence. Then Miriam said, "Do not decide what that means yet." She helped him. "Maybe. Maybe." "Pain likes simple answers," Miriam said. "Evidence rarely does." Callum closed his eyes. "I want it to be simple." "I know. That is why it is dangerous." The next morning, Callum requested a private interview with Alara. She arrived at 9 o'clock exactly. No coffee. No smile. Professional armor. "You needed to speak with me?" she asked. "Yes. Sit down, please." She sat. Callum placed no papers in front of her. He wanted to watch her face first. "Do you remember the Orman Charity Fund?" Her fingers tightened around the tablet. "Only slightly." "Yes." "Were you involved in document access that night?" "What night?" Callum looked at her. "The night of your engagement party." The word landed. Engagement. For a moment, her face emptied. Then she looked at him properly. Not at the suit. Not at the consultant. At his eyes. The color left her face. "Callum." He said nothing. Her lips parted. She stood halfway, then sat again. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not possible." "It is. You're Arlen Vale. I became useful under a name your family had not destroyed." She flinched. "Good." Then he hated that it felt good. Alara's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know." Callum's voice stayed calm. "That sentence is too small for what happened. I didn't know what he was doing. Your credentials opened the cabinet after I left." She froze. There. Real fear. Not performance. Not Dorian's polished sadness. Something raw. "He used my access?" "That is what I'm trying to determine." She covered her mouth. Callum watched carefully. The old Callum wanted to believe her. The new one demanded proof. "Tell me exactly what happened that night," he said. Alara looked toward the glass wall, as if Dorian might appear behind it. "He told me you were in trouble. When? Before the party. He said you had debts. He said you were embarrassed. He said he wanted to help quietly." Callum felt the old wound open, but he did not move. "He told me he was going to offer you a promotion after the announcement. He said the envelope was part of a loyalty test." "A loyalty test?" She nodded, ashamed. "He said some documents had gone missing before. Small things. He said he needed to know if he could trust you with restricted material." "And you believe that?" "He was my brother, and I was supposed to be your husband." That silenced her. A tear ran down her face. "I know." "No," Callum said. "You knew me. That is different." Alara looked down. "I was afraid of him." The sentence was quiet, but it was not an excuse. It was a door. Callum did not walk through it yet. "Did you open the cabinet?" "No." "Did you give him your password?" "No. But my tablet was in his office earlier that day. He said he needed to review seating charts." Callum wrote that down. "When the footage played, why didn't you defend me?" Alara closed her eyes. For the first time, her professional mask broke completely. "Because he showed me documents with your login. He showed me messages. He said if I defended you, I would make it worse for you. He said he was protecting you by not calling the police." Callum almost laughed. Dorian's mercy again. The beautiful cage. "And afterward, I tried to find you. You blocked me. Dorian took my phone that night. He said lawyers advised no contact. By the time I got it back, everything was burning. Then he told me you admitted it privately and left the city." Callum stared at her. "I called you. One call came through. I panicked. You told me not to contact you again." "I know." Her voice broke. "I have heard that sentence in my head for 5 years." Callum wanted to hate her fully. It would have been easier. But truth, as always, was inconvenient. Alara had betrayed him. That remained true. But Dorian had built the betrayal like an architect. Callum stood. "This interview is over." "Callum." "No. In this building, my name is Mr. Vale." She nodded slowly. "Mr. Vale." He walked to the door, then stopped. "Do not warn him." Alara looked at him through tears. "I won't." Callum opened the door. "For your sake, I hope that's true." The next 2 weeks were war without noise. Callum requested files. Dorian delayed. Callum requested backup logs. Celeste objected. Callum cited Northstar's merger agreement. The files appeared. Every time Dorian smiled, Callum asked for another archive. Every time Celeste said irrelevant, Callum marked it withheld. Every mark went into the final review. Dorian began losing patience. Small cracks appeared. A meeting canceled suddenly. A partner snapped at an assistant. Legal counsel asked whether the scope could be narrowed. Northstar refused, because Callum had already sent them a preliminary concern notice. Not an accusation. A concern. Clean. Professional. Deadly. Then came the first real break. A vendor named Halden Strategic Services. It had received millions from charity-linked accounts. Its office address was a mailbox. Its listed director was a retired schoolteacher in Ohio. And its payment approvals were always routed through Dorian's private executive account. Callum found the connection at 11:47 p.m. He did not celebrate. He printed the documents and placed them in a blue folder. Miriam had once said, "When you find the first bone, do not scream. Keep digging." So he dug. Halden paid another company. That company paid another. The third company owned a luxury property outside the city. The property was used for Veron House donor retreats. Officially, it was rented. Unofficially, it belonged to a trust. The trust connected to Celeste, Dorian's legal counsel. Now the circle had shape. The next morning, Dorian invited Callum to lunch. Private dining room. No assistants. No lawyers. Just two men and a table too expensive for honest food. Dorian poured sparkling water. "You've been thorough," he said. "That is the job. You've also been disruptive. That is sometimes the job." Dorian smiled, but his jaw tightened. "North Star wants confidence, not drama." "Then give me clean records." "I have." Callum looked at him. "No, you gave me curated records." Dorian leaned back. "You know, Mr. Vale, I built this firm from nothing. People like to criticize what they could never create." Callum heard the hidden message. "People like you." He placed his napkin on the table. "Creation is impressive. So is concealment. I'm reviewing both." Dorian's smile faded. For the first time, he stopped pretending to like him. "You are ambitious." "No. No. I am patient." Dorian studied him. And then, finally, recognition began to move. Not full. Not certain. A shadow passing over glass. "Have we met before?" Dorian asked. Callum held his gaze. "Yes." Dorian waited. Callum stood. "But you were busy ruining my life at the time." He left before Dorian could answer. That evening, everything changed. Callum returned to his temporary office and found his laptop open. He had locked it. Someone had entered. Nothing obvious was missing. That meant the person was either stupid or very good. Callum checked the hidden access tracker he had installed on day one. A USB device had been inserted at 6:22 p.m. for 11 seconds. Enough to plant something. He smiled. Not happily. Dorian had made a mistake. He had forgotten that Callum had once been framed by digital evidence. A man only needs to burn once to respect fire. Callum shut down the laptop and used a clean backup machine. Then he checked security access. The person who entered his office used a temporary executive override, issued by Celeste. Recorded on camera. He sent the file to North Star. Subject line: potential evidence tampering, immediate preservation required. By morning, North Star froze the merger process. Not canceled. Frozen. That was worse. A canceled deal dies quickly. A frozen deal bleeds in public. Business reporters noticed. Investors called. Employees whispered. Dorian's perfect building began to make nervous sounds. At 3 p.m., an emergency meeting was called. Dorian entered last. His smile was gone. Celeste looked pale. Alara sat at the far end of the table, silent. North Star's representatives appeared on screen. Callum stood at the front with one folder. Only one. Not the full evidence. Not yet. Just enough to make everyone afraid of the next folder. He began calmly. "During this review, I identified repeated irregularities involving charity-linked fund payments, vendor routing, unauthorized document access, and possible interference with review materials." Dorian stood. "This is absurd." Callum continued. "Mr. Veron, please sit down." The room froze. No one spoke to Dorian like that. Dorian smiled in disbelief. "Excuse me. This is a formal review meeting. Interruptions will be noted." A North Star executive said through the screen. "Let him continue." Dorian sat. Slowly, Callum clicked the remote. The screen showed Halden Strategic Services. Payments. Dates. Approvals. Then the mailbox address. Then the retired schoolteacher listed as director. Then the property trust. Then Celeste connection. Celeste whispered, "This is incomplete." Callum nodded. "Yes. That is why the full file has been sent for external forensic review." Dorian turned sharply. "You had no authority to do that." North Star's executive answered. "He did. Under our agreement." There it was. The first public loss of control. Small. Beautiful. Dorian looked at Callum. Now he knew. The recognition was complete. Callum saw the exact second it happened. The eyes narrowed. The mouth tightened. The past returned to the room and sat between them. Callum, Dorian said softly. Alara closed her eyes. The partners turned. Callum did not react. Dorian had said the name like a weapon. But weapons only work when the victim still hides. Callum looked at the room. Yes, my legal name is Callum Arlenvale. Whispers erupted. Dorian stood again. This man has a personal vendetta against me. Callum clicked the remote. The screen changed. Old footage. The engagement party. Callum walking with the envelope. The room watched in stunned silence. Then the footage continued. Not the edited clip from 5 years ago. The full hallway angle. Callum leaving the records room. Then, 11 minutes later, another figure entering. Put up. Face turned. Using Alara's credentials. Opening the cabinet. Removing the envelope. Callum turned to Dorian. You once showed a room half a truth and called it proof. He clicked again. The image sharpened. The hooded figure looked up at the camera for half a second. It was not Alara. It was Dorian's private security chief. The same man who had dragged Callum out that night. The room went dead silent. Callum's voice stayed even. I prefer complete footage. Dorian's face changed. Not much, but enough. For the first time in 5 years, everyone saw him thinking too fast. That was the beginning of his fall. Not prison. Not headlines. Not yet. Just one perfect second where the golden man had no performance ready. Callum closed the folder. And this, he said, is only the first file. The room did not breathe. Dorian looked at the screen, then at Callum, then at the North Star executives watching from the wall. For 5 years, he had lived inside his own legend. Now one file had cracked the glass. But Dorian was not finished. Men like him never fall at the first truth. They negotiate with gravity. He smiled. Small. Cold. This is emotional theater, Dorian said. A damaged man returning with edited footage and old resentment. Callum nodded once. I expected that. He clicked again. A second file appeared. Security system metadata. Original timestamps. Access logs. Backup server verification. Chain of custody. North Star's lead counsel leaned closer to the screen. This footage came from the original archive? Callum answered, yes. Preserved in a disaster recovery server that Veron House forgot to delete. Celeste went white. Dorian looked at her. That look said more than shouting could. Callum continued. The edited version shown at the engagement party was exported 26 minutes before Mr. Veron went on stage. He clicked again. Export user, D. Veron. The silence changed. Before it was shock. Now it was understanding. Alara covered her mouth. One of the senior partners whispered, Dorian. Dorian turned on him instantly. Be quiet. There it was. The mask slipped. Not fully. Just enough for everyone to see the face underneath. Callum did not rush. Rushing would make it feel personal. Patience made it lethal. He opened the next section. The Ormond Charity Fund was not the only case. Over 12 years, 7 charity-linked accounts moved money through the same vendor chain. Halden Strategic Services, Briargate Consulting, Morrow Field Holdings. The names appeared one by one. Boring names. Deadly names. Callum showed payments. Dates. Approvals. False consulting notes. Matching percentages. Luxury property transfers. Political donations. And finally, personal benefits connected to Dorian's private network. No dramatic speech. No screaming. Just records. That was the beauty of it. The room did not need Callum's anger. The documents were angry enough. Dorian stood again. This meeting is over. North Star's executive said, sit down, Mr. Veron. Dorian froze. For the first time, someone richer had spoken to him like an employee. Callum saw it land. A small revenge, but elegant. Dorian slowly sat. Callum turned to Celeste. Your signature appears on 3 trust documents connected to diverted charity payments. Do you want to explain that now, or during the external investigation? Celeste's lips trembled. I acted under instruction. Dorian snapped his head toward her. Celeste. She looked at him. And in that moment, loyalty died. Not from morality. From fear. Powerful people mistake obedience for love. But obedience runs when prison enters the room. Celeste said. He told me the structures were protective. Tax strategy. Donor privacy. Callum nodded. Thank you. Dorian laughed once. Dry? Ugly. You think this makes you clean, Celeste? She looked down. No. North Star's counsel spoke. All merger activity is suspended pending forensic review. We will notify regulators. That sentence was the first real blade. Dorian's empire did not explode. It began to leak. And leaks are worse. They spread. Within 2 hours, the first article appeared. Veyron House merger paused after compliance concerns. Within 4 hours, investors called emergency meetings. Within 6, 2 charities requested independent audits. By morning, Dorian's face was everywhere again. But this time, the caption was not written by him. Callum watched from Miriam's office. Rain tapped against the window. The television showed Dorian entering a black car, surrounded by reporters. Mr. Veyron, did you divert charity funds? Did you frame a former employee? Is North Star canceling the deal? Dorian said nothing. For once. Miriam sat beside Callum, wrapped in her gray coat. You look disappointed, she said. I thought it would feel bigger. It is big. No, I mean inside. Miriam looked at him. Justice does not always feel like victory. Sometimes it feels like exhaustion leaving the body. Callum did not answer. Because she was right. He had imagined this moment for years. Dorian exposed. The world watching. The lie dying. But now that it was happening, Callum did not feel free. He felt empty in places revenge could not reach. Then Alara arrived. Miriam opened the door and looked at Callum first. He nodded. Alara entered slowly. No makeup. No expensive confidence. Just a woman carrying 5 years of delayed truth. I won't stay long, she said. Callum stood near the table. That's probably best. She looked at Miriam. I'm sorry for your son. Miriam's face hardened. Do not use my grief to soften your entrance. Alara lowered her eyes. You're right. Good answer, Callum thought. Too late. But good. Alara turned to him. I gave Northstar everything I had. Callum knew. Emails. Old messages. Calendar entries. A private recording of Dorian admitting he handled the engagement scandal. Not a full confession. But enough. Why now? Callum asked. Alara swallowed. Because I was afraid before. That is honest. Not noble. I know. And because now he's losing. She nodded, tears forming. Yes. Callum respected that more than a fake heroic answer. People like to pretend they found courage in pure light. Usually, they found it when darkness finally came for them too. Alara stepped closer. I should have believed you. Yes. I should have stood beside you. Yes. I loved you. Callum looked at her for a long moment, then said the truth that cost him nothing now. I loved the version of you who would have. Alara broke. Not loudly. That made it worse. She cried with one hand over her mouth, the same way she had cried in the ballroom. But this time, Callum did not move to comfort her. Old love reached for her. New wisdom held it back. I can testify, she said. You should. Will it help? It will help the truth. She nodded. And us. Callum looked at the gray ring box sitting on Miriam's shelf. He had brought it there months ago. A reminder. A relic. A warning. There is no us, he said. Alara closed her eyes. I know. But knowing did not stop the pain. It only gave it a name. 2 weeks later, the formal hearing began. Not a criminal trial yet. A regulatory inquiry. That was better. Cleaner. Harder for Dorian to perform. No ballroom. No champagne. No sympathetic microphone. Just a long table, recorded testimony, and documents arranged in order. Dorian arrived with 3 attorneys. He wore a dark suit and a face designed for cameras. Callum arrived alone. Miriam watched from the back row. Alara sat on the witness list. Celeste had already agreed to cooperate. The security chief had disappeared for 2 days, then returned with his own lawyer and a sudden interest in telling the truth. Again, not morality. Survival. Callum did not care what opened the door, only that it opened. The hearing lasted 9 hours. Dorian denied, deflected, reframed. He used words like miscommunication, legacy process, administrative error, and rogue subordinate. But every elegant lie met a document. Every document had a date. Every date had a login. Every login had a person. And slowly, the story Dorian had built began folding in on itself. Then came the engagement footage. Full version. Uncut. The room watched Callum enter the office. Take the envelope. Place it in the cabinet. Leave. Then the security chief entered. Removed it. Then Dorian received a message. Done. Then Dorian exported the edited footage. Then Dorian walked downstairs and destroyed Callum in front of everyone. No one spoke after the video ended. The investigator looked at Dorian. Mr. Veyron, would you like to explain? Dorian's lawyer whispered urgently. Dorian stared at the table. For the first time since Callum had known him, Dorian looked old. Not weak. Not sorry. Just cornered. I was protecting the firm, he said. There it was. Not an apology. A confession wearing a business suit. The investigator leaned forward. From whom? Dorian's eyes lifted. For 1 second, he looked directly at Callum. And Callum understood. Dorian still believed he was the victim. That was the final ugliness. Some people do not lie because they fear truth. They lie because they believe only their comfort is real. The inquiry ended with referrals. Regulators. Prosecutors. Civil claims. Charity boards. North Star terminated the merger. Clients withdrew funds. Partners resigned. Celeste was suspended. The security chief cooperated. And Veyron House, the glass palace, began collapsing from the inside. Not in one explosion. In quiet legal letters. Frozen accounts. Canceled meetings. Locked offices. Calls not returned. The same way Callum's life had collapsed. Only now, every fall had paperwork. 3 months later, Dorian requested a private meeting. Callum almost refused. Miriam told him to go. Why, he asked. Because you need to see whether you are finished. The meeting happened in a small legal office. No marble. No stage. No crowd. Dorian sat across from him without a tie. He looked thinner. His hair had more gray, but his eyes were still sharp. Predators do not become harmless because they bleed. They only become quieter. Callum Saturday, 5 minutes, he said. Dorian smiled faintly. You always were dramatic. Callum said nothing. Dorian leaned back. You think you won? No. No? I think the evidence won. Dorian looked amused. That sounds like something Miriam would say. Callum's expression did not change. Dorian noticed. Yes, Dorian said. I knew about her. Eventually. Callum's hand stayed still. Careful. Dorian smiled. Still loyal to ghosts. Callum stood. The old Callum might have shouted. The new one understood bait. We're done. Dorian's smile vanished. I can still make this ugly. Callum turned at the door. You already did. Then he placed one final envelope on the table. Black. Thick. Sealed. Dorian stared at it. For the first time, Callum saw fear. Real fear. What is that? Callum opened the door. The part one didn't need to use. Dorian's voice changed. What's inside? Callum looked back. Your future, if you ever touch another innocent person. Then he left. The envelope contained copies of private records connecting Dorian to people even his lawyers did not know about. Not to blackmail him. Callum would never use it illegally. It had already been sealed with his attorney and sent to investigators under conditional disclosure. But Dorian did not know how much had been shared. And uncertainty is a cage for men who survive on control. 1 year later, Callum stood in front of Veyron House again. The sign had been removed. The silver tower remained, but the top floors were empty. Another company would move in soon. New flowers. New desks. New lies, probably. The world did not become pure because one man fell. Callum knew that now. Justice was not a sunrise. It was maintenance. A constant cleaning of dark corners. Miriam had passed away in spring. Quietly. In her sleep. On her desk, Callum found a note. Only one sentence. Make the boring parts dangerous. So he did. He founded a small investigative compliance firm. Not glamorous. Not loud. It helped whistleblowers. Charities. Small employees accused by powerful people. People with truth, but no strategy. On the wall of the office, he hung no awards. No photos of Dorian. No newspaper articles. Only a framed copy of his first rejected job application after the scandal. A reminder, not a failure, of the door he had been forced to build himself. Alara testified fully. Her testimony helped prosecutors. She left the city after that. Before leaving, she sent Callum a letter. He did not open it for 3 weeks. When he finally did, it was short. I know forgiveness is not owed. I know silence can be a form of violence. I am sorry I became useful to the person who hurt you. I hope your peace becomes louder than my regret. Callum read it twice, then placed it in a drawer. Not the drawer with the ring box. A different one. That mattered. Dorian's trial took longer than people expected. Rich men buy time before they lose freedom. But the result came. Guilty on multiple counts. Fraud. Obstruction. Evidence tampering. Conspiracy. The sentence was not as long as some wanted. Long enough for newspapers. Long enough for donors. long enough for Dorian to learn what it meant to have doors locked from the outside. On the day of sentencing, reporters waited outside the courthouse. Callum did not speak to them. He stood across the street, hands in his coat pockets, watching quietly. A young journalist recognized him. "Mr. Vale, do you feel vindicated?" Callum turned. Years ago, he would have wanted the world to hear his answer. Now he understood that not every truth needs an audience. But this one did. He looked into the camera. "I was never trying to prove I was perfect," he said. "I was trying to prove he lied." "Do you hate him?" Callum thought about it. The honest answer surprised him. "No." The journalist blinked. "You don't. Hate keeps you standing in the room where they hurt you. I had work to do elsewhere." Then he walked away. That night, Callum returned to Miriam's old war room. It was his office now, but he had kept the table. The same wooden table where he had first learned that truth, without strategy, could die in daylight. He opened a cabinet and placed Dorian's final court order inside. Not on display, in a file. One case among many. Then he took out the gray ring box. For years, it had been proof of betrayal. Then proof of blindness. Then proof of survival. Now it was only a box. Callum opened it. The ring caught the light. Small. Beautiful. Useless. He walked to the river before sunrise. The city was quiet. The water moved dark and steady beneath the bridge. For a long time, he held the ring in his palm. He did not think of Alara first. He thought of the man he had been. The man who wanted so badly to belong that he mistook invitation for love. He forgave that man. Not for being foolish. For being human. Then he dropped the ring into the river. No music played. No crowd watched. No one clapped. That was how he knew it was real. The ring vanished without sound. Callum stood there until the first light touched the buildings. His phone buzzed. A message from a new client. A young accountant at a charity had been accused of leaking donor records after questioning strange payments. Callum read it once, then smiled. Not with anger. Not with victory. With purpose. He typed back. "Send me everything. Start with the boring parts." Then he walked into the morning. 5 years ago, Dorian had tried to end his story with humiliation. But powerful men often make one fatal mistake. They believe destruction is an ending. They never understand that for the right kind of person, it is an education.